Hello everyone, I'm Tom Powell. We're about to bring you a Fort Wayne's NBC special presentation. But before we begin, an explanation about the title. Months ago, while working on a story, I watched a documentary about the Syrian refugee crisis. At one point, a refugee looks at the filmmaker and pleads to him, saying, "We're dying out here, brother, and nobody cares." That stuck with me. And ever since, we've been working to put together stories with a Fort Wayne connection to help you understand what's at stake, even though it's happening so far away.
1 million people. That's how many Syrian refugees are living in Lebanon. That's according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. That's the highest per capita concentration of refugees in the world. 1 in 4 people there, and 60% are children. That's nearly 4 times the population of Fort Wayne, so I know it's hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about a place that is on the other side of the world. So to show you why we should care, we're going to focus on a much smaller story. The story of 2 friends who dropped everything in the fort to try and help.
So I figured out how this lock works.
On a cold winter's night in Fort Wayne,
You know there's snow there right now, right?
Caleb Yale and Dr. Karina Balsingham get ready to leave on a trip to Lebanon.
But what we're dealing with a lot of times in places like the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon are people that were kind of on the run from the beginning because things became so dangerous so fast for them and where they lived.
This footage from NBC News helps illustrate the danger Caleb is referring to. The extreme violence caused by the conflict in Syria, forcing millions to flee.
Right now, suitcases in the back.
Caleb and Karina have agreed to document their journey for us.
On our way.
A journey that took them from Fort Wayne to Chicago, where they boarded a flight to Beirut, Lebanon.
Landed in Beirut.
Renting a car, they drove the rest of the way to a refugee settlement in the Bekaa Valley, a ride that revealed they were in for more than they expected.
Everything
Flooded
is just
everywhere.
flooded.
A winter storm creating one crisis on top of another. The pair came expecting to focus on teaching classes at a community center called the Menara Center. Caleb, who owns a business back in the fort, ready to teach business skills to refugees. Karina, who just graduated from medical school, prepared lesson plans for women about basic health skills. Instead, the center's project manager, Nadia Radini, asks them to help with more urgent needs, like buying new mattresses to replace the ones destroyed in the floods.
With Nadia to put a down payment on the mattresses we're buying for the displaced refugees right now. It's really bad weather.
Many of the refugees forced to find new shelter, some inside this rundown building.
This is where they're all going to be staying because their homes have been lost to the flooding. They've lost most everything they have yet again.
Reflecting on what they saw, the same word kept coming up over and over again.
Well, it's a little overwhelming because you think that when you walk into one and you look around and you think, well, there's a few people living this way, and then you see a few more, and then you realize that this is, thousands and thousands of people all living this way.
I don't think you could describe what it was like until you were there for a few hours or a few days.
The refugees are in desperate need of other supplies, so the team tries to use some of the center's donations to help.
Back here, you see this guy behind me. He is filling out certificates, so we can give the certificates to the people in the camps, and then they come and pick up 50 liters of diesel, which will last them about 3 weeks.
When they get to the camp, they meet up with a young man named Hassan Al-Shawi.
So here Nadia is giving him the coupon for the oil so that they can have oil to heat up their camp. So we just interviewed these guys and managed to help them out a little bit with a few weeks of heat. It was nice and toasty in that tent, so I'd like for them to keep that going.
The 23-year-old escaped to Lebanon from Syria 7 years ago. He lost his father and other relatives to the fighting. He had to flee ISIS. Now, in order to escape the everyday life in the camps, he says the Menara Center provides a sanctuary in the shambles. It's a place full of learning with lessons on film, art, and music. A place where refugees can learn skills that hopefully will help them break the cycle of poverty. Filmmaker Elias Matar, who has featured the plight of the refugees in documentaries, established the center. In his words, he realizes it's a teardrop in the ocean of need, but he felt he couldn't turn his back on one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time.
Our main focus at the Menara Center is education for these young adults. That's the most important part for us. 70% of these young adults have no education past 8th grade, and we feel we need to provide something from them. From art to economics, from English to first aid, any possibility that we can educate them and give them an edge.
Elias invited Caleb and Karina to the center to teach for a week, and they did find time during their visit to fulfill that original mission. Karina sits down surrounded by women eager to learn how to keep their families healthy. In Caleb's class, Hassan learns basic skills involved in starting a small business. He soaks up all the knowledge the center has to offer.
Just in time.
Back at the camp, Caleb sits down to ask Hassan what the center means to him. He says the war robbed him of his education, something the center is starting to rebuild.
He feels their safety, and which psychologically it's good for him. And he says, now I'm addicted to going to the center.
The time that Caleb and Karina spent at the center and in the settlements was short, but the impact they made on these students is evident in their smiles as they wave goodbye. The imprint left on these Fort Wayne natives, unmistakable when they share their story.
So you have kind of this dichotomy of that they had to escape Syria, where things had gotten so terrible that you're really truly fearing just for your life on a day-to-day basis, to where they're now in these camps where at least they're not under direct threat of dying. So now it's just the languishing. So it's not so much worrying about dying as much as worrying about that you just can't live.
I think I see things differently. I think I always have, but seeing it firsthand, experiencing it, and trying to help, it's the way I think is a little differently now. It's, what can we do just to put a little dent, instead of trying to change everything or think of the big picture of, this is not right, this can't happen. It is happening. There's nothing we can do about it. If we can just, do a little part, like the Menara Center. It changed me in that way, like trying to just figure out little ways to change someone's lives instead of trying to figure out how to change a circumstance that can't be changed.
Hassan says before he left Syria, he was jailed and tortured. He spent 9 months not knowing where his parents were until he found them again when he arrived in Lebanon. He does hope to go back to Syria one day, but for now, his life remains in the camp with a mental escape every week to the Menara Center. Coming up, we go a step further to take part in a community conversation held recently at Indiana Tech about the refugee crisis as our Fort Wayne's NBC special presentation continues.